So right now is the time to really lock in and focus, especially if you're in crypto. Why do I say that? Because we have the elections coming up in literally under 30 days, in a couple of weeks. And if you know anything about crypto and you know cycles, you know that the elections and the halving play a big role in the 4-year cycle in Bitcoin, in the 4-year halving cycle. Now, if you're unfamiliar with some of these terms that I'm saying, like halving and cycles, go to our crypto playlist. Check out some of the previous videos that we've already made. You can learn some information there and get familiar with this topic, because this is something we talk about because we study Bitcoin and we strategize in the market with Bitcoin. Now, why do I say it's an important time to lock in and focus? Because elections are coming up. And if we look at price and we study patterns, that's what we like to do as traders or investors in the market. Now, this is not financial advice by any means, guys, just educational purposes for you guys on understanding cycles and how these two things like the halving and elections factor in. If you're new, this might be some new information for you. And this is some information that you want to study when it comes to Bitcoin is cycles. You want to get familiar with cycles. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about cycles and some of my experience from cycles, as I've been in Bitcoin for the last 10 years now. I first was able to grab my first Bitcoin around 900 USD and then $1,200. If I only knew what I know about Bitcoin now, then I would have approached it probably a lot differently than with the amount of information and knowledge I have. And then obviously experience. Since then, I've gained knowledge through experience in the market. So obviously when you're with such a volatile thing like this through different cycles after 9-10 years, you see pretty much a lot of things, a lot of different things. You hear a lot of different stories and you learn lessons along the way as well. So it's been a good journey, and I emphasize that on these videos because Bitcoin obviously changed my life. I've mentioned that in a few of the other crypto videos. So Bitcoin, I think, is the best crypto. Obviously, there's money you can make on other cryptos. I talk more about that inside my academy. You'll probably see me talk mainly more about just Bitcoin on these YouTube videos and maybe like Ethereum, stuff like that. Just the main two, right? I think those two are the best. Why? Because again, if you watched our previous video on adoption, we know that Bitcoin and Ethereum are looking at that mass adoption, especially Bitcoin. So let's look at the charts a little bit more, look at some things here, go into a deep dive now. If we look at previous halvings in US elections, this is the time in the season to really pay attention for it. Doesn't mean the market has to go right up at elections. It's what could come afterwards. Doesn't mean election day, price is gonna spike up. Anything can happen, right? But when we look at price on a historical basis, we can see after elections is when we tend to go in what's called a bull run. There's different phases in the crypto market. You have a bear market, you have a bull market, and you have accumulation. Remember, accumulation / growth phase. Okay, there's different phases the market goes through. It doesn't go up forever and it doesn't go down forever. When we look at Bitcoin's halving timeline, and again, if you're not familiar with the halving, guys, make sure you check out the video that we made on understanding what the halving is. If we look at the halving history and we understand 360 days before and 360 days after, so a year before and a year after, what happens with price? One thing is that a year before, price typically finds a bottom or a low point. If we consider a year before the halving, this is more of like when the bear market's kind of over, I would say, where price starts to go into accumulation / growth before the bull market. The bull market happens after the halving, right? Tied more into the elections, I would say. So when we consider a couple of these things and where price is right now, because I'm going to show you guys the charts and tie all this in together, where price is right now on the chart. If we go to Bitcoin, price is pretty high. It's relatively at the previous all-time high from the last halving rally and elections rally. If you see here, I have marked 2020 halving, 2020 elections. So where is price right now in relation to the cycle, right? Well, we have to look back. We have to look back and consider every time price was around its all-time high, it went in a bull run, okay? I want you to consider that. There's different times where price is actually at its previous all-time high during that halving stage, and then we later go on to elections. The halving happens, later on we go to elections. So the bull run happens typically after elections, what we've seen in price historical data. Now, one thing that I've recognized is that price is typically around the previous all-time high before it really goes in its bull stage, before it really goes parabolic, let's say. This is something important to understand, because if we go back to the chart for a minute, right now, price is near the previous all-time high. The halving is marked here. We're going into the 2024 election soon. Price looks like it's been in a bull run. But let's go back to the last cycle. Let's kind of get an idea of where we are in cycles. Let's go to here. If we consider where the elections were, it's the red line here that I got marked. So this red line is the elections, the 2020 elections. This black line is the 2020 halving, which happened in May 2020. November 2020 elections. So we had 2020 halving, we had 2020 elections. After elections, price went parabolic, like I've shown you here. It's usually after elections, right? So where was price around election time? Well, let's look. Around the previous all-time high, all right? So you have to consider price went up. Price was already going up. If we look at this year, right? We're going into the elections very soon. Where is price? Relatively around the previous all-time high rally, right? If you go back and study cycles and use this concept, you'll realize price is doing what it's done. Price is where it's been in terms of cycles. Price is doing what it's done and what it's supposed to really do when you really dive deep into Bitcoin's protocol, what it's made to do. It's doing what it's done and what it's made to do, essentially. If you go back and study these cycles, if you were to go to this chart and mark where November is, you would see it matches up with previous all-time highs. Previous all-time highs relatively around there before we go into a bull stage. So there's different market cycles in crypto that you really need to get kind of a hold and grasp of, especially if your goals are to invest long-term into the market. Again, not financial advice, but everybody has different goals, right? So you have to understand the market can go through these different cycles, and a bull run is faster and shorter than a bear market. On average, a bear market will last longer than a bull market. A bull market is a stage where price is rapidly increasing, and then greed starts to enter the market. A lot of retail starts to come in as well. Typically this phase is fast, and it's where a lot of people get averaged in at a higher price. So you have to understand cycles and stages of the market, because things don't go up forever and things don't go down forever, right? If you look at this shows you examples of different crypto cycles. The green represents a bull cycle. The red represents a bear market, and that's where the bull market peaked, where it made its last highest point before declining almost 90% in value from its high. Then we go into a stage of growth, more of accumulation growth. So if we go back to this chart, that's what that is. That going up before the halving, before the elections, is accumulation and growth, okay? It might look sideways a little bit more on some of the examples. This is going up before the halving, and if we consider where the elections would have been in there, before the elections as well. Price is already going up because the elections would have been a bit after July. So we have accumulation growth here. Price went from roughly, it looks like about $120 to $659, a 407% increase before the halving and before the elections, before going on bull. So red is bear, the yellow, more accumulation growth. Before we get to where we are right now in the market, we could see historically, price typically increases 400, 300%. Let's go back to the chart. If we look at this year, how much has price gone up? Price has gone up about 370% from 18,000 down here, or the 16,000 low, up to 74K, a new all-time high now. So is this the bull stage? A lot of people are asking. I don't think so, because when we look at historical data, historical patterns, a year after is typically when the market's at a higher point, a year after the halving. So the halving happened in April 2024 of this year. We're not a year after yet, right? And we're going into that seasonal time where potentially things could go up, right? So these are the cycles you need to understand, but you need to also understand time, fear, and greed sentiments. When things usually have those runs on a 4-year scale. Because there's months like October. October, typically the market goes up, or like July and March. Those are typical months when you look at the 14 years where Bitcoin can have an increase, or crypto can generally be more bullish in some months on a larger scale. But when you look at those months on a 4-year scale, that's where it becomes more key. You gotta look at some of those months and tie them into the 4-year cycle, kind of like here. Everything kind of ties in together. This shows you a halving progress example from the 2012, 2016, 2020, 2024. Now, this is a little older chart. We're gonna go back to the chart one more time. So this shows you just some halving progress from previous years as well. 2012, 2016, 2020, and then the year that we're in right now. You can see halving can be a growth stage that leads into more of a bull. This is a much higher time frame chart. It's a weekly, so this is a long period of time that we're looking at here. We're looking from 2012 all the way to where we are right now in the market. So remember, bull, bear, accumulation, but think of accumulation slash growth, because in accumulation, that's typically when your market's made a bottom. It can have a growth phase inside of there. So what can mark the end of a bull run? I think it's understanding how long these cycles typically last for, and setting maybe a realistic expectation and not trying to aim too far in the cycle. So what I mean by that, guys, is when we go back to the charts and we look at things on a 4-year scale, typically the market peaks in months like January to March. And if we think about the halving is in April. If you look at a lot of cycles, January is typically a month where the market can have some pullback, some sell pressure. So I think when you consider cycles and you look at where we are now and where the market typically peaks, you're really looking for extreme greed. You want to be paying attention to times where the market has extreme greed on a bigger scale, on the year or on an all-time scale. This is a huge thing to pay attention to and really learn when it comes to cycles, and especially when you understand monthly averages more, so seasonality more. I look at things on the 4-year cycle, so that's why I don't have as much emotion, because I strategize in a bear market and I can strategize in a bull market. DCA in a bear market, because a bear market typically lasts longer than a bull market. So when you look at extreme greed, this is typically when the market's reached high prices. That's one thing I like to look for as a sentiment factor in the market when it comes to Bitcoin. Because typically when we reach these extreme prices like 70,000 for instance, this was also, look at the date, 12/06/2023. So last year in December, the market was reaching extreme greed. What was the price of Bitcoin at that time? Around 42,000, 45,000 actually in price when you look at here. The fear and greed index is really crucial, because if you look at where we are kind of right now, we're neutral, more in a fear neutral sector. About a week ago, we were around fear here. We haven't been here since September October. All right, we got September, October of last year. What was the price of Bitcoin at this time? 26,000 roughly, 27, around a little bit above that $25,000 key price level. A year later, so think about months, seasonality. There's something I'm trying to teach here without spending 4 hours, right? If you guys want to learn more about this, hit me up because we have a whole boot camp inside of our academy. Teach this stuff every week pretty much. If you look at a year ago, fear is at the same point as to where we were a year ago. Now the only difference is price is much, much higher in consideration. It's not lower, but when you look at price, really what it's been doing is more accumulating. Because if you go back to what I was saying about cycles and you look at the last 4-year cycle in Bitcoin, where we went from the 20K top and we went bear and we made our bottom and then we ran up. How much did price increase there, right? Price went from 3,000 to 13,000, 14,000. And remember, it's pretty much near the all-time highs. Until the elections, price pretty much stayed in more accumulation phase. It was more sideways. There was also COVID in that time, so that caused a really, really flash crash of a whole month of just Bitcoin dropping, days of it dropping so much. That caused mass fear in the market. In the 2020 COVID crisis, mass fear was induced to the market. Everyone was selling their Bitcoin. Think about fear when you look at fear on a broader scheme, when you look at it on a larger scheme, you can really get a sense of where good buying and selling opportunities are in the market, or DCAing out of the market can come in handy. So to simplify this, guys, when you look at the chart, it's really doing what it's done. If all this information is brand new to you guys, I teach this stuff every week inside of my academy, and we have a lot of pre-recorded videos on this. So I hope this video was some help, guys, on kind of understanding where price is right now in the market, where I think we are. You just got to look back and follow price patterns. History repeats itself in the market, and that's what I like to think. I don't like to get too emotional and think of what about this, what about that. I like to just follow patterns because patterns have proved themselves correct up to this point. And when we talk about the adoption in crypto, referring to part 1 of this video, adoption is huge as well. So that's a key thing to take into consideration. If you're new into crypto, be sure to watch the other videos in our playlist. That'll help you learn a lot of the information we talked about in this video.